Book 7, The Edge of Desire. When Christian Allardyce, 6th Marquess of Dearne, reads these words, his world turns upside down. Christian, I need your help. There is no one else I can turn to. Lady Letitia Randall is a woman like no other. The day he left her behind to fight for king and country was the most difficult day of his life. He never forgot the feel of her lips against his, but never expects to see her again. Yet now she seeks his help, and Christian knows he will not resist her plea. Let's read. August 1816, London. He should make her wait. Thoughts and wild conjecture rolling in his head. Christian Michael Allardyce, 6th Marquess of Dearne, slowly descended the stairs of the Bastion Club. He'd been nursing a brandy and his despondency in the library when Gastrop, the club's major domo, had appeared with a note. The note summoning him to face his past. That past awaited him in the front parlor, the room he and the club's other 6 owners, all ex-members of one of the more secret and select arms of His Majesty's service, who had established the club as their boltole against the impugning ladies of the town, had stipulated as the only room in which the ladies were permitted to be permitted. In the months since the club's opening, that rule had incident by incident fallen the wayside, but Gastrop had rightly shown his particular lady into the formal front parlor. He really should make her wait. She said she would 12 years ago, but then another had come along, and while he'd been buried deep in Napoleon's Europe, she lightly thrown aside her promise to him, fallen in love with, and had married George Randall. Now she was Lady Letitia Randall instead of Marquess of Dearne. Deep in his heart, where nothing and no one any longer touched, he felt betrayed. She had been Lady Letitia Randall for 8 years. Although he'd returned to England 10 months ago, he and she not moved in the same very small circle. They'd exchanged not one word. They hadn't even exchanged nods. Even that was way too much to expect of him, given their past. She seemed to understand that, coolly detached, hotly distant, as if he and she never been close, never been lovers. She'd been studiously kept her distance until now. Christian, I need your help. There is no one else I can turn to. L. That was all the words her note had contained, yet between them those bare words spoke volumes. He felt continued steadily down the treads he should make her wait, and yet he couldn't imagine what had brought her here. Nor could he imagine why his staff at Allardyce House in Grosvenor Square had divulged his whereabouts. His butler Percival was a paragon of his calling. Nothing short of a force of nature could have induced him to disobey his master's express orders. Then again, the lady presently occupying the front parlor had qualified as such from her earliest years. Stepping off the last tread, he studied the parlor door. It was closed. He could turn around and retreat and let her wait for at least another 10 minutes, even 15. The desperation in her plea guaranteed she would wait. Not meekly, meek wasn't in her repertoire, but she would grit her teeth and remain until he designed to see her. Some part of him wanted to hurt her as she'd hurt him, as he still hurt. Despite the years, the wound was raw, it still bled. The faint, elusive scent of jasmine drew him to the door. It was curiosity, he told himself, that had him reaching for the handle, not the incredible, irresistible attraction that had from the first drawn them together, that even after 12 years of neglect and 8 years of dissolution till arched across a crowded ballroom and made him ache. Opening the door, steeling himself, he went in. The first surprise was her weeds. He paused in the doorway, rapidly assessing. Seated in one of the armchairs flanked small hearth, the chair facing the door. She was clothed in unrelieved funeral black, dull, and only on any other lady it would have looked somber. On her, even fully veiled as she was, the depressing hue did nothing to dim her vitality. It screamed in every line of her svelte form a humming, thrumming energy, harnessed to some degree, but forever in danger of escaping, exploding. She had only to move a gloved hand to instantly attract and fix any man's attention. Certainly his. She demonstrated raising both hands, long, slender palms, delicate fingers encased in fine black pigskin. She gripped the edge of the black veil and lifted it, settling it back over her piled hair. He could see her face. The catalogue of her features didn't do her justice. It was the epitome of feminine aristocrat beauty, not solely because of the composition, but also because of her animation. In repose, her face was serenely beautiful. Awake, her expressions were startlingly vividly. "Your father?" he asked, looking at her. He assumed the full mourning signified that her father, the Earl of Nunchance, had passed. But if the head of the house of Vaux had died, the town would have been abuzz with the news. Not only had he not heard a whisper, but Letitia's face, naturally pale, held no hint of sorrow. If anything, she seemed to be reining in her temper. Not her father, then. Regardless of the familiar disruptions that were commonplace among the Vaux, she was sincerely fond of her eccentric sire. No, not Papa. Randall has been murdered. As if saying the words had released her from some spell, she finally met his eyes. Hers sparked with undisguised temper. Randall was beaten to death in his study last night. The servants found him this morning, and the idiot runners had fixed on Justin as the murderer. He blinked. I see. Moving into the room slowly, he gave slowly to give himself time to dissect her news. He sank in the arms facing hers across the hearth. Justin Lord Vaux was her younger brother. She was presently 28, nearly 29, making Justin 26. Brother and sister were close, always had been. And what does Justin say? That's it, we can't find him to ask. But rather than do so, the authorities have fixed on him as the most convenient scapegoat. They are, no doubt, organizing a hue and cry as we speak. Watching him stroll effortlessly, gracefully across the room toward her, allowing herself to had been a mistake. All that harness power condensed in one male, a male no one with functioning eyes could rate anything less than dangerous, was a phenomenon guaranteed to distract any living, breathing woman. To him, charm and grace had always come easily, something she, being a Vaux, and therefore attuned to all the nuances of appearance, had always appreciated. She hadn't been this close to him for 12 long years. Her decision to keep her distance when he had reappeared among the ton had been wise. Even with a good 6 feet separating them, she could feel her rib cage tightening, enough to affect her breathing, enough to make her feel just a touch giddy, to have her nerves stretching in telltale anticipation. Why did the authorities fix on Justin? Was he there? Apparently he called on Randall last night. Randall's stupid butler, who thoroughly disapproves of Vaux, Justin in particular, was only too happy to point his finger. But you know as well as I do, all appearances to the contrary, Justin would never kill anybody. She held his gaze. Now she simply asked in a low, raspy, seductive voice, "Will you help?" He arched a brow. "How much is my help worth to you?" She blinked, then searched his face, his eyes, hers narrow. After a pregnant pause during which she assessed and considered his true meaning, she replied, "You know perfectly well I will do anything to clear Justin's name." Absolute decision, total commitment rang in her tone. Very well. He heard himself obeyingly agree. He hadn't known he would, certainly hadn't thought he might ask her in return. Wasn't even sure of his motives in pressuring such a bargain on her, but anything gave him a wide field. Revenge of a sort for all those years of hurt yet might be his. But you know he's not going to do it. You know, as much as he might be hurt and angry at her, she's now available. You see? And I'll bet you there was a reason. I bet you there was a had to get married reason somewhere out there. Tell me what happened. The sequence of events leading to Randall's death as you know it. Come to the house. Let me explain. She thought it would be easier having places and things to point out to distract him, but having him by her side again kept her nerves in a state of perpetual reactiveness. The spot in question, she's like, the blood's over there. So they're obviously between the space in the paragraphs, they've gone to the house. And so they're at South Audley Street, where she had been with her husband, and she's pointing to the spot on the floor. And he says she wasn't particularly squeamish, but the sight of the reddish-brown stain had her gorge rising. No matter what she felt for Randall, no man should die as he had, brutally banished to death with the poker from his own fireplace. Which way was he facing, toward the fire or the desk? He felt like a flame down one side of her body. She frowned. I don't know. They didn't tell me, and they wouldn't let me in here to see. They said it was too gory. They've taken away the poker, drawing in a tight breath. She turned and waved at the table by one of armchairs flanking the hearth. They've cleared the table. There were 2 glasses on it. So I've been told. Brandy in both. Tell me what you know. When last did you see him? Last night I went to dinner at the Martindales, then on to a soiree in Cumberland House. I returned rather late. Randall had stayed in. Sometimes he did when he had business to attend. He waylaid me in the hall and asked me in here. He wanted to discuss a family matter. She and Randall had been married for 8 years, but there had been no children. With any luck, Christian would imagine that had been the subject of their discussion. The subject she so delicately refrained from mentioning. His gaze on her face, Christian just knew that she was hoping to lead him up some garden path. Declining to follow, he made a mental note to return to the subject of her late-night discussion with her husband at some later point. For now, discussion with a vox involved discussion could encompass verbal warfare. We had a row. Her face darkened and she continued, I don't know how long it went on for, but I eventually swept out and left him. So you argued loudly. No broken vases, ornaments flung about. It wasn't that sort of argument. So you left Randall here, hale and whole, and then what? What next did you know of this? Nothing at all until my dresser came rushing in this morning to tell me about the body. By the time I dressed and got downstairs, the butler his officious little scourge by the name of Mellon, had taken upon himself to summon the authorities, who assigned an investigator from Bow Street, a weaselly, narrow-minded man whose only concern is to close the case as soon as possible, regardless of the truth. One other thing, my dresser babbled. She was in a complete tiz. Was that this morning the door to the study was locked, with the key on the floor some way inside. Melton and the footman tried to force the door, but couldn't. Luckily, someone in the household can pick locks. That was how they got in and found him. So, if the door was locked and the key to the door was inside the room, then how did the killer get out? Is there a garden door? Is there a glass door leading outside to the house on the other side of the room? You got to answer these questions. You got to see what's going on in the room. Besides all the swooning. We love to swoon. Hey, naked guy on the cover. If you watch Flashback Monday, you understand all of that. How far? A few yards, not more. That's what it sounded like. Hermione, Lord Dearne, she bobbed a curtsy. I don't know if you would remember me. He let his smile turn charming, as if he hadn't forgotten the scrap who had been all of 4 when he'd last seen her. Luckily, her hair was a tailing feature in common with, as far as he heard, all those born to the House of Vox. She possessed luxuriant dark locks. Despite her darkness, she would never be described as anything other than red. Her attention shifting to her older sister, Hermione advanced into the room. Christian nodded that she didn't look at the bloodstain. Her focus was on Letitia. That's really all I know of my knowledge, what I gathered from the investigator. No. He held a hand. Don't tell me. I want to hear it from him direct. Without my interpretations, without your appellations. Are you all right? Hermione asked. Of course. I was wondering about you. Once Justin turns up and the fools who call themselves the authorities admit it wasn't him and start looking for the real murderer, I'll be fine. Christian inwardly blinked. No sarcasm ran beneath her words. With a Vox, no one needed to guess. Yet she just lost a husband of 8 years in shocking circumstances. He studied her. She was looking at her mind. But there was nothing in either woman's attitude beyond sisterly comfort. While her mind was presently a less intense version of Letitia, she no doubt grew into her dynamic powers in time. Both sisters seemed at ease with each other, the only real difference being in age and the suggestion of care of viewing Hermione as a person who needed to protect and watch over that colored Letitia's eyes. If you'll summon the butler, Mellon, I'd like to speak with him. Interrogate him. He needed to focus on the matter at hand, rather than let his Jezebel play on his sympathies. Despite that, Mellon dutifully fixed his gaze on her, ignoring Christian. You rang, ma'am? Indeed, Mellon, Lord Dearne, she waved at Christian, has some questions he'd like to ask you. Please answer as best you can. Mellon reluctantly turned to Christian, who smiled easily. You've been Randall's butler for how long? 12 years, my lord. Long before Letitia's marriage to Randall. Christian glanced at her, but all he could detect in her face, her stance, was a species of resigned indifference towards Mellon. She didn't like the man, but had let him remain as head of her household. She had to wonder why. He returned his gaze to the butler. How did you get on with your late master? It's been a pleasure working for Mr. Randall, my lord. And the rest of the staff feel the same, my lord. None of the staff had any problems with the master. The man's antigen was obvious. He didn't like Letitia, and Letitia didn't like him. Letitia knew he was invariably kind to lower orders. The impulse had bred into her, but all instinct not something she could readily change. There had to be some other reason Mellon's patent dislike of her. Very well, if you could tell me what, to your certain knowledge, drawing solely from your own observation, happened last night, stuff from the point where Lady Randall returned home. Well, she returned home. Sorry. The mistress came in, and the master asked to speak with her, here in the study. They closed the door, so I don't know what was said, but there was a great to-do. We could hear her lady ranting and raving, as she's wont to do. Ah, there we have it. Devoted to his master, Mellon resented Letitia's treatment of Randall. Did anything occur during that time her ladyship and Randall were arguing in the study? Indeed, sir, although not in the study. Lord Justin Vox, the mistress's brother, called to see the master. It was the master he wanted to see, not the mistress. He could hear the carrying on in the study, so he said he'd wait in the library. I led him there. He told me I did not need to wait on him. It was latish by then. Said he'd show himself out in once the mistress had left. So you retired? I wish I hadn't now, but his lordship often here makes himself at home, and the master had mentioned earlier that he was expecting him. So well, it was queer he didn't want me, so I went. Even without glancing at Letitia, Christian had a little doubt how to interpret Mellon's statement. Justin hadn't liked Randall and therefore called frequently, making himself at home, supporting Letitia, very likely keeping an eye on her. That was revealing in itself. Although Justin and Letitia were close, they'd never lived in each other's pockets. There was Hermione, too. Christian glanced at her and wondered if Letitia's protective attitude had some specific cause beyond basic family instincts. Clearly, Justin had made his dislike of Randall sufficiently obvious, hence Mellon's rapid dislike of him. So beyond the point, you have no knowledge of events, he caught Mellon. You can't say for certain that Lord Vox left the library, went into the study, and met with your master. No, but I can say he didn't leave until more than an hour later. My room's above the door, and I heard it open shut. I got up and looked out, just to be sure, and saw Lord Vox making his way down the steps onto the pavement. Which way did he turn? Left toward Piccadilly. Justin's lodgings are in Jermyn Street. Mellon had given the correct direction without hesitation. It most probably had been Justin's leave. Christian thought then, if anyone else called on your master last night after Lord Vox or even before, would you have known? Indeed, sir. If they had rung the bell, I would have heard it. It rings in my room as well as the kitchen. Even if they knocked on the door, I couldn't help but hear. My room is right above. I was in my pantry, seeing the cutlery from the breakfast table when Mrs. Crockett, the housekeeper, came to tell me that Tweeny, who does the study of the morning, couldn't open the door. So I went straight away, thinking perhaps the master had gone to his study early. Sometimes he does lock the door, but when I knocked, there was no reply, not even when I called. Then one of the footmen looked through the keyhole. I was surprised he could, as the key would have been in it. He turned green, and the master was lying on the floor, and there was blood. What happened? We tried to force the door, me and two footmen, but we couldn't budge it. We were thinking of breaking a window and putting someone through when one of the maids told the scullery boys could pick locks. So he picked the lock, we got in the room, and the master was dead. I realize this is distressing. He addressed the comment more to her than Mellon, then returned his gaze to the butler. But if you could describe how Mellon was lying on his back or on his face. On his back, my lord. There wasn't much of his face left to speak of. Huh? So it would seem Randall was facing the fire and his attacker. I guess there were 2 glasses of brandy on the side table. Had they been drunk? Both had been sipped, but neither drained. Where exactly was the key? There on the floor by the knot in the wood. Put your finger on that spot. The best I recall it was here. Hermione's eyes hadn't left Mellon, but as he straightened, she glanced at Christian expectantly. Unsure what was going on, he looked at Mellon, asked the obvious question. How do you imagine the key got there? I can't rightly say, my lord. If you had to guess, I think that Lord Vox locks the door behind him and then slipped the key back under the door. That would seem the most likely explanation, except why would Lord Vox do that? If he just murdered your master in a gruesome fashion, why go to the bother of locking the door and slipping the key back inside? Mellon could not answer. To give himself time to escape? Dearne, permit me to introduce Mr. Barton of Bow Street. She didn't need to say anything more. Her tone effectively conveyed her contempt. Clearly, Barton had already succeeded in thoroughly putting her back up. He just arrived. Deliberately mild, Christian nodded to Barton. Lady Randall has asked me to investigate the circumstances surrounding her husband's death. Might I ask why you imagine Lord Justin Vox has, to use your phrase, scampered? Barton wasn't at all sure how to act toward him. Christian left him to make up his mind, which resulted in Barton opting for caution. He answered civilly. In light of the circumstances, I've been around to his lordship's lodging. I was given to understand that her ladyship here sent a message requesting his presence earlier, but had received no reply. Surprising as his lordship has disappeared. Disappeared, Letitia said. Christian could all but see the wheels in her mind charming. I dare say he's gone to the country to visit with his friends. It's August, after all. I expect, Mr. Barton, that your disappearance is nothing more than that. Barton looked pungent. Would you say his lordship normally leaves for the country in a tearing rush late at night with his man who hadn't had any warning? Because that's what happened according to his landlord who lives downstairs. And then there's this. He's got a garment. He shook out the garment, revealing to be a gentleman's coat. Would this be of your brother's, your lady? Do you recognize it? It looks like one of Justin's, halting before the coat. It's from Schultz. You might want to be careful about touching it, your ladyship. There's blood on it, and it's your husband's. Every drop of blood retained from Letitia's face. Barton. The single word resonated with menace, yet was nothing to do, he felt. His hands at his fists, he battled an urge to strike the runner. His tone itched to tear strips off the man, but they needed to learn what he discovered. Did the landlord have any idea where his lordship was headed? No. Did he know how they left in a hired carriage, or did Lord Vox have his curricle? His lordship drove off in his curricle. Do you have any further light to shed on this murder? No, my lord. The body's been taken to the police surgeon. When he's done with the examination, the corpse will be released to her ladyship for burial. Did he really have to use the word corpse? Did he really? Doesn't he have no couth? He's dealing with the nobility here. Couldn't he said body or something? Very good. When that time comes, you will personally inform Mellon, and he will convey the information to me. Her ladyship is not to be disturbed with this matter again. Any query you have, you may make through me. He held Barton's gaze. I trust I make myself clear. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, 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 sir. Under Christian's hard gaze, Barton nodded. As you wish, my lord. Good. Rest assured that any pertinent information we find that shed lights on Randall's murder will be conveyed to you at the earliest opportunity. Letitia turned her head and stared at him. He was being conciliatory to the enemy. That was an olive branch if she'd ever seen one. She was about to draw breath and unleash some of her suppressed feelings, on which of them, Carton or Bratton, she couldn't make up her mind. But then Christian caught her eye. I'll be on my way then, sir. And a nod from Christian. Mellon followed, closing the door, the thick inch door behind him. How dare he? Christian glanced at Hermione. Although she remained silent, she clearly engaged her sister on agreeing with every dramatic and forcefully elucidated sentiment. Her enthusiastic "hear, hear" was clear in her eyes, in her whole being. Eventually finishing her dissection of Barton, his progenitors and potential offspring, she swung. As for you, how could you? You slapped him down well enough to begin with, and I thank you for that. But after one halfway reasonable agreement, you patted him on the head and let him go. Worse, you all but promised to share what we find. What the devil were you thinking? That he might learn something we need to know. Christian kept his voice mild. It reflected how he felt. He smiled, as always amused. He'd never been affected by Vox hysterics, which was one point that always fascinated the Vox. Almost without exception, others got extremely nervous when they let their tempers loose. Most tended to edge away or escape if they could. Not him. He found their unbarreled, unleashed energy refreshing. From all that apparent venom, they were never intentionally malicious, contrary to what many thought. They were neither dangerous nor insane. There's an old wise saying, he offered, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Well, as to that, you would know. There was a quality in her tone he neither recognized nor could place. She held his gaze for an instant, then turned away. She gazed over the bloodstain on the floor, then she started for the door. If you finished here? Yes. He fell in with her wake, pausing to allow Hermione to precede him through the doorway. But I have more questions for you, too. Without comment, Letitia led across the front hall into the room diagonally opposite from the study. She gestured as she swung to face him. The front parlor. I tend to sit here more than in the drawing room. To his left lay an archway leading deeper into the house, though he saw ranks of bookshelves packed with books. The library? When she nodded, he headed that way. Letitia and Hermione followed. The library was a good-sized room with a floor-to-ceiling bookshelves covering much of the walls. Halting in the middle of the room, he surveyed the books filling them. Randall, not that he ever read. He bought them but didn't read. He didn't read. He could read, of course, but he never read a book, not that I saw. Justin, this is what he was doing while he was waiting for Randall. He followed her over her shoulder. Seneca, letters from Stoic, appropriate reading for male Vox. What else do you want to know? If we want to shift suspicion from Justin, we need to reconstruct the crime and demonstrate that someone else had opportunity to kill Randall. Step by step, he took them over what they knew from the time Letitia came home from the chaos of the following morning. The exercise got them nowhere. He grimaced. Barton's right. The most obvious suspect is Justin. Perhaps Letitia conceded, but he didn't do it. The key, don't forget that. You said it yourself, her eyes fixed on Christian. Why would Justin do such a thing? It makes no sense. Not if he were the murderer, so he can't be the murderer. Christian looked into her eyes and wondered not if but what she was hiding. That wasn't the first time she'd spoken in Justin's defense. He glanced at Letitia. After spending a few hours in Hermione company, he felt increasingly certain that Vox's temperament was as he remembered. They hadn't changed. Vox's betrayal of him aside, loyalty, especially of the familiar variety, was ingrained. Letitia had, he felt certain, with no real thought for herself, walked across the gulf between them, braving whatever wrath he might seek to visit on her, whatever price he might ask to gain his help in clearing Justin. Hermione demonstrably felt the same. The question in Christian's mind was whether she acted on that feeling, and if so, how. He fixed Hermione with a look. Do you know anything more about what happened last night? No, only what I told you. He didn't believe her. From the corner of his eye, he noticed that Letitia was now regarding her sister with a slight frown. She said nothing. Both, he felt, certainly could lie through their teeth if that's what needed to protect Justin, even though the Vox had rarely lied, and family loyalty worked both ways. It was very possible Justin was acting to protect someone. And he looks at both ladies. Tell me you didn't kill Randall. She blinked but continued to return his steady gaze. He saw her make the connection. Her mind, following his path, had trod. Her brows rose fractionally. I didn't kill Randall. I often felt like killing him, but no, I didn't. I wouldn't. Not more than Justin would. And that, Christian reflected, was the right answer. In contrast to Hermione, he had no doubt whatever that Letitia was telling the truth. Very well, that leaves us with one large and immediate question. Where is Justin? So, who killed her husband? Where is Justin? And will the two of them get together? We'll have to see. But here is your Bastion Club. And we read book 1. And we read book 2. And book 3. Book 4. Book 5. Book 6. We just did book 7. And next week, DEVERELL. Everybody learns his identity. Aren't you excited? It's Sinster Bastion week. See you next week. Have a good one. Oh, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks.